And the first verse. The Lord now spoke to Moses from the tabernacle and commanded him to give the following instructions to the people of Israel. When you sacrifice to the Lord, use animals from your herds and flocks. If your sacrifice is to be an ox as a burnt offering, use only a bull with no physical defects. Bring the animal to the entrance of the tabernacle where the priest will accept your gift for the Lord. The person bringing it is to lay his hand upon its head, and then it becomes his substitute. The death of the animal will be accepted by God instead of the death of the man who brings it as the penalty for his sins. The man shall then kill the animal before the Lord, and Aaron's sons and priests will present the blood before the Lord, sprinkling it upon all sides of the altar at the entrance of the tabernacle. Then the priest will skin the animal and quarter it, and build a wood fire upon the altar, and put the sections of the animal and its head and fat upon the wood. The internal organs and the legs are to be washed. Then the priest will burn them upon the altar, and they will be an acceptable burnt offering with which the Lord is pleased. If the animal used as a burnt offering is a sheep or goat, it too must be a male and without any blemishes. The man who brings it will kill it before the Lord on the north side of the altar, and Aaron's sons, the priest, will sprinkle its blood back and forth upon the altar. Then the man will quarter it, and the priest will lay the pieces with the head and the fat on top of the wood on the altar. But the internal organs and the legs shall first be washed with water. Then the priest shall burn it upon the altar as an offering of the Lord. For burnt offerings give much pleasure to the Lord. If anyone wishes to use a bird as his burnt offering, he may choose either turtle doves or young pigeons. A priest will take the bird to the altar and wring off its head. Good Lord. And the blood shall be drained out at the side of the altar. Then the priest will remove the crop and the feathers and throw them on the east side of the altar with the ashes. Then grasping it by the wings, he shall tear it apart. Jesus, but not completely. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar, and the Lord will have pleasure in this sacrifice. Good Lord. Leviticus 2:1. Anyone who wishes to sacrifice a grain offering to the Lord is to bring fine flour and is to pour olive oil and incense upon it. Then he is to take a handful representing the entire amount to one of the priests to burn, and the Lord will be fully pleased. The remainder of the flour is to be given to Aaron and his sons as their food, but all of it is counted as holy burnt offering to the Lord. If bread baked in the oven is brought as an offering to the Lord, it must be made from finely ground flour, baked with olive oil, but without yeast. Wafers made without yeast and spread with olive oil may also be used as an offering. If the offering is something from the griddle, it may be made of finely ground flour without yeast and mingled with olive oil. Break it into pieces and pour oil upon it. It is a form of a grain offering. If your offering is cooked in a pan, it too shall be made of fine flour mixed with olive oil. However it is prepared, whether baked, fried, or grilled, you are to bring this grain offering to the priest, and he shall take it to the altar to present it to the Lord. The priests are to burn only a representative portion of the offering, but all of it will be fully appreciated by the Lord. The remainder belongs to the priests for their own use, but it is all counted as a holy burnt offering to the Lord. Use no yeast with your offerings of flour, for no yeast or honey is permitted in burnt offerings to the Lord. You may offer yeast, bread, and honey as thanksgiving offerings at harvest time, but not as burnt offerings. Every offering must be seasoned with salt, because the salt is a reminder of God's covenant. If you are offering from the first of your harvest, remove the kernels from a fresh ear, crush and roast them, then offer them to the Lord. Put olive oil and incense in the offering, for it is a grain offering. Then the priest shall burn part of the bruised grain mixed with oil and all of the incense as a representative portion before the Lord. Leviticus chapter 3, verse 1. When anyone wants to give an offering of thanksgiving to the Lord, he may use either a bull or a cow, but the animal must be entirely without defect if it is to be offered to the Lord. The man who brings the animal shall lay his hand upon its head and kill it at the door of the tabernacle. Then Aaron's son shall throw the blood against the sides of the altar, and shall burn before the Lord the fat that covers the inward parts, the 2 kidneys, and the loin fat on them, and the gallbladder, and it will give the Lord much pleasure. If a goat or sheep is used as a thank offering to the Lord, it must have no defect and may be either a male or female. If it is a lamb, the man who brings it shall lay his hand upon its head and kill it at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest shall throw the blood against the sides of the altar, and shall offer upon the altar the fat, the tail removed close to the backbone, the fat covering the internal organs, the 2 kidneys with the loin fat on them, and the gallbladder as a burnt offering to the Lord. If anyone brings a goat as his offering to the Lord, he shall lay his hand upon its head and kill it at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest shall throw its blood against the sides of the altar, and shall offer upon the altar as a burnt offering to the Lord the fat that covers the insides, the 2 kidneys and the loin fat on them, and the gallbladder. The burnt offering is very pleasing to the Lord. All the fat is Jehovah's. This is a permanent law throughout your land, that you shall eat neither fat nor blood. Leviticus chapter 4, verse 1. Then the Lord gave these further instructions to Moses. Tell the people of Israel that these are the laws concerning anyone who unintentionally breaks any of my commandments. If a priest sins unintentionally and so brings guilt upon the people, he must offer a young bull without defect as a sin offering to the Lord. He shall bring it to the door of the tabernacle and shall lay his hand upon its head and kill it there before Jehovah. Then the priest shall take the animal's blood into the tabernacle and shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil that bars the way to the Holy of Holies. Then the priest shall put some of the blood upon the horns of the incense altar before the Lord in the tabernacle. The remainder of the blood shall be poured out at the base of the altar for burnt offerings, at the entrance to the tabernacle. Then he shall take all the fat on the entrails, the 2 kidneys, and the loin fat on them, and the gallbladder, and shall burn them on the altar of burnt offering, just as in the case of a bull or cow sacrifice as a thank offering. But the remainder of the young bull, the skin, meat, head, legs, internal organs, and intestines, shall be carried to a ceremonially clean place outside the camp, a place where the ashes are brought from the altar and burned there on wood fire. If the entire nation of Israel sins without realizing it and does something that Jehovah has said not to do, all the people are guilty. When they realize it, they shall offer a young bull for a sin offering, bringing it to the tabernacle, where the leaders of the nation shall lay their hands upon the animal's head and kill it before the Lord. Then the priest shall bring its blood into the tabernacle and shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil. Then he shall put blood upon the horns of the altar where there in the tabernacle before the Lord. And all the remainder of the blood shall be poured out at the base of the burnt offering altar at the entrance to the tabernacle. All the fat shall be removed and burned upon the altar. He shall follow the same procedure as for a sin offering. In this way the priest shall make atonement for the nation, and everyone will be forgiven. The priest shall then cart the young bull outside the camp and burn it there, just as though it were a sin offering for an individual, only this time it is a sin offering for the entire nation. If one of the leaders sins without realizing it and is guilty of disobeying one of God's laws, as soon as it is called to his attention, he must bring as his sacrifice a male goat without any physical defect. He shall lay his hands upon its head and kill it at the place where the burnt offerings are killed and present it to the Lord. This is his sin offering. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of this sin offering and place it with his finger upon the horns of the altar of the burnt offerings, and the rest of the blood shall be poured out at the base of the altar. All the fat shall be burned upon the altar, just as if it were the fat of the sacrifice of a thank offering. Thus the priest shall make atonement for the leader concerning his sin, and he shall be forgiven. If any one of the common people sins and doesn't realize it, he is guilty. But as soon as he does realize it, he is to bring as a sacrifice a female goat without defect to atone for his sin. He shall bring it to the place where the animals for burnt offerings are killed, and there lay his hands upon the head of the sin offering and kill it. And the priest shall take some of the blood with his finger and smear it upon the horns of the burnt offering altar. Then the priest shall pour out the remainder of the blood at the base of the altar. All the fat shall be taken off, just as in the procedure for the thank offering sacrifice. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar, and the Lord will appreciate it. Thus the priest shall make an atonement for that man, and he shall be forgiven. However, if he chooses to bring a lamb as a sin offering, it must be a female without physical defect. He shall bring it to the place where the burnt offerings are killed, and lay his hands upon its head and kill it there as a sin offering. The priest shall take some of the blood with his finger and smear it upon the horns of the burnt offering altar, and all the rest of the blood shall be poured out at the base of the altar. The fat shall be used just as in the case of a thank offering lamb. The priest shall burn the fat on the altar as in any other sacrifice made to Jehovah by fire, and the priest shall make atonement for the man, and his sin shall be forgiven. That's a lot of killing. Leviticus chapter 5, verse 1. Anyone refusing to give testimony concerning what he knows about a crime is guilty. Anyone touching anything ceremonially unclean, just as the dead body of an animal forbidden for food, wild or domesticated, or the dead body of some forbidden insect, is guilty, even though he wasn't aware he was touching it. Or if he touches human discharge of any kind, he becomes guilty as soon as he realizes that he has touched it. If anyone makes a rash vow, whether the vow is good or bad, when he realizes what a foolish vow he has taken, he is guilty. In any of these cases, he shall confess his sin and bring his guilt offering to the Lord, a female lamb or goat, and the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be freed from his sin and need not fulfill the vow. If he is too poor to bring a lamb to the Lord, then he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons as his guilt offering. One of the birds shall be his sin offering, and the other his burnt offering. The priest shall offer as the sin offering whichever bird is handed to him first, breaking its neck, Jesus, but not severing its head from its body. Then he shall sprinkle some of the blood at the side of the altar, and the rest shall be drained out at the base of the altar. This is the sin offering. He shall offer the second bird as a burnt offering, following the customary procedures that have been set forth. So the priest shall make atonement for him concerning his sin, and he shall be forgiven. If he is too poor to bring turtle doves or young pigeons as a sin offering, then he shall bring 1/10 of a bushel of fine flour. He must not mix it with olive oil or put any incense on it, because it is a sin offering. He shall bring it to the priest, and the priest shall take out a handful as a representative portion and burn it on the altar, just as in any other offering to Jehovah made by fire. This shall be his sin offering. In this way the priest shall make atonement for him for any sin of this kind, and he shall be forgiven. The rest of the flour shall belong to the priest, just as was the case with the grain offering. And the Lord said to Moses, if anyone sins by unintentionally defiling that what is holy, then he shall bring a ram without defect, worth whatever fine you charge against him, as his guilt offering to the Lord. And he shall make restitution for the holy thing he has defiled, or the tithe omitted, by paying for the loss plus a 20% penalty. And he shall bring it to the priest, and the priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the guilt offering, and he shall be forgiven. Anyone who disobeys some law of God without realizing it is guilty anyway, and must bring a sacrifice of a value determined by Moses. The sacrifice shall be a ram without blemish, taken to the priest as a guilt offering. With it the priest shall make atonement for him, so that he will be forgiven for whatever it is he has done without realizing it. It must be offered as a guilt offering, for he is certainly guilty before the Lord. Leviticus chapter 6, verse 1. And the Lord said to Moses, if anyone sins against me by refusing to return a deposit, or something borrowed or rented, or by refusing to return something entrusted to him, or by robbery, or by oppressing his neighbor, or by finding a lost article and lying about it, swearing that he doesn't have it, on the day he is found guilty of any such sin, he shall restore what he took, adding a 20% fine, and give it to the one he has harmed. And on the same day he shall bring his guilt offering to the tabernacle. His guilt offering shall be a ram without defect, and must be worth whatever value you demand. He shall bring it to the priest, and the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven. Then the Lord said to Moses, give Aaron and his sons these regulations concerning the burnt offering. The burnt offering shall be left upon the hearth of the altar all night, with the altar fire kept burning. The next morning the priest shall put on his linen undergarments and his linen outer garments, and clean out the ashes of the burnt offering, and put them beside the altar. Then he shall change his clothes and carry the ashes outside the camp to a place that is ceremonially clean. Meanwhile, the fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must not go out. The priest shall put on fresh wood each morning, and lay the daily burnt offering on it, and burn the fat of the daily peace offering. The fire must be kept burning upon the altar continually. It must never go out. These are the regulations concerning the grain offering. Aaron's son shall stand in front of the altar to offer it before the Lord. The priest shall then take a handful of finely ground flour with olive oil and incense mixed into it, and burn it upon the altar as a representative portion for the Lord. It will be received with pleasure by the Lord. After taking out this handful and remainder of flour will the remainder of the flour will belong to Aaron and his sons for their food. It shall be eaten without yeast in the courtyard of the tabernacle. Stress this instruction, that if it is baked, it must be without yeast. I have given to the priest this part of the burnt offering made to me. However, all of it must be holy, just as the entire sin offering and the entire guilt offering. It may be eaten by any male descendant of Aaron, any priest, generation after generation, but only the priest may eat these offerings made by fire to the Lord. And Jehovah said to Moses, on the day Aaron and his sons are anointed and inducted into the priesthood, they shall bring to the Lord a regular grain offering, 1/10 of a bushel of fine flour, half to be offered in the morning and half in the evening. It shall be cooked on a griddle using olive oil, and shall be well cooked, and then brought to the Lord as an offering that pleases him very much. As the sons of the priests replace their fathers, they shall be inducted into office by offering this same sacrifice on the day of their anointing. This is a perpetual law. These offerings shall be entirely burned up before the Lord. None of it shall be eaten. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron and his sons that these are the instructions concerning the sin offering. This sacrifice is most holy, and shall be killed before the Lord at the place where the burnt offerings are killed. The priest who performs the ceremony shall eat it in the courtyard of the tabernacle. Only those who are sanctified, the priests, may touch this meat. If any blood sprinkles onto their clothing, it must be washed in the holy place. Then the clay pot in which the clothing is boiled shall be broken. Or if the bronze kettle is used, it must be scoured and rinsed out thoroughly. Every male among the priests may eat this offering, but only they, for it is most holy. No sin offering may be eaten by the priest of any of its blood taken into the tabernacle to make atonement in the holy place. The carcass must be entirely burned with fire before the Lord. Leviticus 7:1. Here are the instructions concerning the most holy offering for guilt. The sacrificial animal shall be killed at the place where the burnt offering sacrifices are slain, and its blood shall be sprinkled back and forth upon the altar. The priest will offer upon the altar all its fat, including the tail, the fat that covers the insides, the 2 kidneys, and the loin fat and the gallbladder. All shall be set aside for sacrificing. The priest will burn them upon the altar as a guilt offering to the Lord. Only males among the priests may then eat the carcass, and it must be eaten in a holy place, for this is a most holy sacrifice. The same instructions apply to both sin offering and the guilt offering. The carcass shall be given to the priest who is in charge of the atonement ceremony for his food. When the offering is a burnt offering, the priest who is in charge shall be given the animal's hide. The priests who present the people's grain offerings to the Lord shall be given whatever remains of the sacrifice after the ceremony is completed. This rule applies whether the sacrifice is baked, fried, or grilled. All other grain offerings, whether mixed with oil or dry, are the common property of all the sons of Aaron. Here are the instructions concerning the sacrifices given to the Lord as special peace offerings. If it is an offering of thanksgiving, unleavened shortbread shall be included with the sacrifice, along with unleavened wafers spread with olive oil and loaves from a batter of flour mixed with olive oil. This thanksgiving peace offering shall be accompanied with loaves of leavened bread. Part of this sacrifice shall be presented to the Lord by a gesture of waving it before the altar. Then it shall be given to the assisting priest, the one who sprinkles the blood of the animal presented for the sacrifice. After the animal has been sacrificed and presented to the Lord as a peace offering to show special appreciation and thanksgiving to him, its meat is to be eaten that same day, and none left to be eaten the next day. However, if someone brings a sacrifice that is not for thanksgiving, but is because of a vow or simply a voluntary offering to the Lord, any portion of the sacrifice that is not eaten the day it is sacrificed may be eaten the next day. But anything left over until the third day shall be burned. For if any of it is eaten on the third day, the Lord will not accept it. It will have no value as a sacrifice, and there will be no credit to the one who brought it to be offered. And the priest who eats it shall be guilty, for it is detestable to the Lord, and the person who eats it must answer for his sin. Any meat that comes into contact with anything that is ceremonially unclean shall not be eaten but burned. And as for the meat that may be eaten, it may be eaten only by a person who is ceremonially clean. Any priest who is ceremonially unclean but eats the thanksgiving offering anyway shall be cut off from his people, for he has defiled what is sacred. Anyone who touches anything that is ceremonially unclean, whether it is uncleanness from man or beast, and then eats the peace offering, shall be cut off from his people, for he has defiled what is holy. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel never to eat fat, whether from oxen, sheep, or goats. The fat of an animal that dies of disease or is attacked and killed by wild animals may be used for other purposes, but never eaten. Anyone who eats fat from an offering sacrificed by fire to the Lord shall be outlawed from his people. Never eat blood, whether it is birds or animals. Anyone who does shall be excommunicated from his people. And the Lord said to Moses, tell the people of Israel that anyone bringing a thanksgiving offering to the Lord must bring it personally with his own hands. He shall bring the offering of the fat and breast, which is to be presented to the Lord, by waving it before the altar. Then the priest shall burn the fat upon the altar, but the breast shall belong to Aaron and his sons, while the right thigh shall be given to the officiating priest. For I have designated the breast and thigh as donations from the people of Israel to the sons of Aaron. Aaron and his sons must always be given this portion of the sacrifice. This is their pay. It is to be set apart from the burnt offerings and given to all who have been appointed to minister to the Lord as priests, to Aaron and to his sons. For on that day that the Lord anointed them, he commanded that the people of Israel give these portions to them. It is their right forever throughout all their generations. These were the instructions concerning the burnt offering, grain offering, sin offering, and guilt offering, and concerning the consecration offering and the peace offering. These instructions were given to Moses by the Lord on Mount Sinai to be passed on to the people of Israel so that they would know how to offer their sacrifices to God in the Sinai desert. Leviticus chapter 8. The Lord said to Moses, "Now bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tabernacle with their garments, the anointing oil, the young bull for the sin offering, the 2 rams, and the basket of bread made without yeast, and summon all Israel to a meeting there." So all the people assembled, and Moses said to them, "What I am now going to do has been commanded by Jehovah." Then he took Aaron and his sons and washed them with water, and he clothed Aaron with the special coat, sash, robe, and the ephod jacket with its beautifully woven belt. Then he put on him the chest piece and deposited the Urim and Thummim inside its pouch, and placed on Aaron's head the turban with the sacred gold plate at its front, the holy crown as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then Moses took the anointing oil and sprinkled it upon the tabernacle itself and on each item in it, sanctifying them. When he came to the altar, he sprinkled it 7 times, and also sprinkled the utensils of the altar and the wash basin and its pedestal to sanctify them. Then he poured the anointing oil upon Aaron's head, thus setting him apart for his work. Next, Moses placed robes on Aaron's sons with the belts and caps as the Lord had commanded him. Then he took the young bull for the sin offering, and Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon its head, as Moses killed it. He smeared some of the blood with his finger upon the 4 horns of the altar and upon the altar itself to sanctify it, and poured out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. Thus he sanctified the altar, making atonement for it. He took all the fat covering the entrails, the fatty mass above the liver, and the 2 kidneys and their fat, and burned them all on the altar. The carcass of the young bull with its hide and dung was burned outside the camp, as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then he presented to the Lord the ram for the burnt offering. Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon its head, and Moses killed it and sprinkled the blood back and forth upon the altar. Next he quartered the ram and burned the pieces, the head and the fat. He then washed the insides and the legs with water, and burned them upon the altar, so that the entire ram was consumed before the Lord. It was a burnt offering that pleased the Lord very much, for Jehovah's directions to Moses were followed in every detail. Then Moses presented the other ram, the ram of consecration. Aaron and his sons laid their hands upon its head. Moses killed it and took some of its blood and smeared it upon the lobe of Aaron's right ear and the thumb of his right hand, and upon the big toe of his right foot. Next he smeared some of the blood upon Aaron's sons, upon the lobes of their right ears, upon their right thumbs, and upon the big toes on their right feet. And the rest of the blood he sprinkled back and forth upon the altar. Then he took the fat, the tail, the fat of the inner organs, the gallbladder, the 2 kidneys and their fat, and the right shoulder, and placed on top of these 1 unleavened wafer, 1 wafer spread with olive oil, and a slice of bread, all taken from the basket that had been placed there before the Lord. All this was placed in the hands of Aaron and his sons to present to the Lord by a gesture of waving them before the altar. Moses then took it all back from them and burned it upon the altar, along with the burnt offering to the Lord, and Jehovah was pleased by the offering. Now Moses took the breast and presented it to the Lord by waving it before the altar. This was Moses' portion of the ram of consecration, just as the Lord had instructed him. Next he took some of the anointing oil and some of the blood that he had sprinkled upon the altar, and sprinkled it upon Aaron, and upon his clothes, and upon his sons, and upon their clothes, thus consecrating to the Lord's use Aaron and his sons and their clothes. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons, "Boil the meat at the entrance of the tabernacle, and eat it along with the bread that is in the basket of consecration, just as I instructed you to do. Anything left of the meat and bread must be burned." Next he told them not to leave the tabernacle entrance for 7 days, after which time their consecration would be completed, for it takes 7 days. Then Moses stated again that all he had done that day had been commanded by the Lord in order to make atonement for them. And again he warned Aaron and his sons to stay at the entrance of the tabernacle day and night for 7 days. "If you leave," he told them, "you will die. This is what the Lord has said." So Aaron and his sons did all that the Lord had commanded Moses. Leviticus chapter 9. On the 8th day of the consecration ceremonies, Moses summoned Aaron and Aaron's sons, and the elders of Israel, and told Aaron to take a bull calf from the herd for a sin offering, and a ram without bodily defect for a burnt offering, and to offer them before the Lord. And tell the people of Israel, Moses instructed, to select a male goat for their sin offering, also a yearling calf and a yearling lamb, all without bodily defect for their burnt offering. In addition, the people are to bring to the Lord a peace offering sacrifice, an ox and a ram and a grain offering, flour mingled with olive oil, for today, Moses said, Jehovah will appear to them. So they brought all these things to the entrance of the tabernacle, as Moses had commanded, and the people came and stood there before the Lord. Moses told them, "When you have followed the Lord's instructions, his glory will appear to you." Moses then told Aaron to proceed to the altar and to offer the sin offering and the burnt offering, make an atonement for himself first and then for the people, as the Lord had commanded. So Aaron went up to the altar and killed the calf as a sacrifice for his own sin. His sons caught the blood for him, and he dipped his finger in it and smeared it upon the horns of the altar and poured out the rest at the base of the altar. Then he burned upon the altar the fat, kidneys, and gallbladder from this sin offering, as the Lord had commanded Moses. But he burned the meat and hide outside the camp. Next he killed the burnt offering animal, and his sons caught the blood, and he sprinkled it back and forth upon the altar. They brought the animal to him piece by piece, including the head, and he burned each part upon the altar. Then he washed the insides and the legs, and offered these also upon the altar as a burnt offering. Next he sacrificed the people's offering. He killed the goat and offered it in just the same way he had the sin offering for himself. Thus he sacrificed their burnt offering to the Lord in accordance with the instructions God had given. Then he presented the grain offering, taking a handful and burning it upon the altar, in addition to the regular morning offering. Next he killed the ox and ram, the people's peace offering sacrifice, and Aaron's sons brought the blood to him, and he sprinkled it back and forth upon the altar. Then he collected the fat of the ox and the ram, the fat from their tails, and the fat covering the inner organs, and the kidneys and the gallbladders. The fat was placed upon the breasts of these animals, and Aaron burned it upon the altar. But he waved the breast and right shoulder slowly before the Lord as a gesture of offering it to him, just as Moses had commanded. Then with his hands spread out toward the people, Aaron blessed them and came down from the altar. Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle, and when they came out again, they blessed the people. And the glory of the Lord appeared to the whole assembly. Then fire came down from the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and fat on the altar. And when the people saw it, they all shouted and fell flat upon the ground before the Lord. Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1. But Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, placed unholy fire in their censers, laid incense on the fire, and offered the incense before the Lord, contrary to what the Lord had commanded them. So fire blazed forth from the presence of the Lord and destroyed them. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord meant when he said, 'I will show myself holy among those who approach me, and I will be glorified before all the people.'" And Aaron was speechless. Then Moses called for Mishael and Elzaphan, Aaron's cousins, the sons of Uzziel, and told them, "Go and get the charred bodies from before the tabernacle and carry them outside the camp." So they went over and got them and carried them out in their coats, as Moses had told them to. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not mourn, do not let your hair hang loose as a sign of your mourning, and do not tear your clothes. If you do, God will strike you dead too, and his wrath will come upon all the people of Israel. But the rest of the people of Israel may lament the death of Nadab and Abihu, and mourn because of the terrible fire the Lord had sent. But you are not to leave the tabernacle under penalty of death, for the anointing oil of Jehovah is upon you." And they did as Moses commanded. Now the Lord instructed Aaron, "Never drink wine or strong drink when you go into the tabernacle, lest you die. And this rule applies to your sons and to all your descendants from generation to generation. Your duties will be to arbitrate for the people, to teach them the difference between what is holy and what is ordinary, what is pure and what is impure, and to teach them all the laws Jehovah has given through Moses." Then Moses said to Aaron and to his sons who were left, Eleazar and Ithamar, "Take the grain offering, the food that remains after the handful has been offered to the Lord, by burning it on the altar. Make sure there's no leaven in it, and eat it beside the altar. The offering is most holy. Therefore you must eat it in the sanctuary in a holy place. It belongs to you and to your sons from the offerings to Jehovah made by fire, for so I am commanded. But the breast and the thigh, which have been offered to the Lord by the gesture of waving it before him, may be eaten in any holy place. It belongs to you and to your sons and daughters for your food. It is your portion of the peace offering sacrifices of the people of Israel. The people are to bring the thigh that was set aside along with the breast that was offered when the fat was burned, and they shall be presented before the Lord by the gesture of waving them. And afterwards they shall belong to you and your family, for the Lord has commanded this." Then Moses searched everywhere for the goat of the sin offering and discovered that it had been burned. He was very angry about this with Eleazar and Ithamar, the remaining sons of Aaron. "Why haven't you eaten the sin offering in the sanctuary, since it is most holy, and God has given it to you to take away the iniquity and guilt of the people, to make atonement for them before the Lord?" he demanded. "Since his blood was not taken inside the sanctuary, you should certainly have eaten it there, as I ordered you." But Aaron interceded with Moses. "They offered their sin offering and burnt offering before the Lord," he said. "But if I had eaten the sin offering on a day such as this, would it have pleased the Lord?" And when Moses heard it, that he was satisfied. Leviticus 11:1. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Tell the people of Israel that the animals which may be used for food include any animal with cloven hooves which chew its cud. This means that the following may not be eaten: the camel, it chews the cud, chews the cud but does not have cloven hooves. The coney or rack badger, because although it chews the cud, it does not have cloven hooves. The hare, because although it chews the cud, it does not have cloven hooves. The swine, because although it has cloven hooves, it does not chew the cud. Tongue twisters. You may not eat their meat or even touch their dead bodies. They are forbidden foods for you. As to fish, you may eat whatever has fins and scales, whether taken from the rivers or from the sea. But all other water creatures are strictly forbidden to you. You mustn't eat their meat or even touch their dead bodies. I'll repeat it again. Any water creature that does not have fins or scales is forbidden to you. Among the birds, these are the ones that you may not eat: the eagle, the mitre, the osprey, the falcon, all kinds, the kite, the raven, all kinds, the ostrich, the night hawk, the seagull, the hawk, all kinds, the owl, the cormorant, the ibis, the marsh hen, the pelican, the vulture, the stork, the heron, all kinds, the hoopoe, the bat. No insects may be eaten, with the exception of those that jump. Locusts of all varieties, ordinary locusts, ball locusts, crickets, and grasshoppers may be eaten. All insects that fly and walk or crawl are forbidden to you. Anyone touching their dead body shall be defiled until the evening and must wash his clothes immediately. He must also quarantine himself until nightfall as being ceremonially defiled. You are also defiled by touching any animal with only semi-parted hooves, or any animal that does not chew the cud. Any animal that walks on paws is forbidden to you as food. Anyone touching the dead body of such an animal shall be defiled until evening. Anyone carrying away the carcass shall wash his clothes and be ceremonially defiled until evening, for it is forbidden to you. These are the forbidden small animals which scurry about your feet or crawl upon the ground: the mole, the rat, the great lizard, the gecko, the mouse, the lizard, the snail, the chameleon. Anyone touching their dead body shall be defiled until evening, and anything upon which the carcass falls shall be defiled. Any article of wood or of clothing, a rug or a sack, anything it touches must be put into water, and it is defiled until evening, and that it may be used again. After that, it may be used again. If it falls into a pottery bowl, anything in the bowl is defiled, and you shall smash the bowl. If the water used to clean the defiled article touches any food, all of it is defiled. Any drink which is in the defiled bowl is also contaminated. If the dead body of such an animal touches any clay oven, it is defiled and must be smashed. If the body falls into a spring or cistern where there is water, that water is not defiled, yet anyone who pulls out the carcass is defiled. And if the carcass touches grain to be sown in the field, it is not contaminated. But if the seeds are wet and the carcass falls upon it, the seed is defiled. If an animal which you are permitted to eat dies of disease, anyone touching the carcass shall be defiled until evening. Also, anyone eating its meat or carrying away its carcass shall wash his clothes and be defiled until evening. Animals that crawl shall not be eaten. This includes all reptiles that slither upon their bellies, as well as those that have legs. No crawling thing with many feet may be eaten, for it is defiled. Do not defile yourselves by touching it. I am the Lord your God. Keep yourselves pure concerning these things, and be holy, for I am holy. Therefore do not defile yourselves by touching any of these things that crawl upon the earth. For I am the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You must therefore be holy, for I am holy. These are the laws concerning animals, birds, and whatever swims in the water or crawls upon the ground. These are the distinctions between what is ceremonially clean and may be eaten, and what is ceremonially defiled and may not be eaten, among all animal life upon the earth. Leviticus chapter 12. The Lord told Moses to give these instructions to the people of Israel. When a baby boy is born, the mother shall be ceremonially defiled for 7 days, and under the same restrictions as during her monthly menstrual periods. On the 8th day, her son must be circumcised. Then for the next 33 days, while she is recovering from her ceremonial impurity, she must not touch anything sacred nor enter the tabernacle. When a baby girl is born, the mother's ceremonial impurity shall last 2 weeks, during which time she will be under the same restrictions as during menstruation. Then for a further 66 days, she shall continue her recovery. When these days of purification are ended, the following instructions are applicable whether her baby is a boy or a girl. She must bring a yearling lamb as a burnt offering and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. She must then take them to the door of the tabernacle to the priest, and the priest will offer them before the Lord and make atonement for her. Then she will be ceremonially clean again after her bleeding at childbirth. These then are the procedures after childbirth. But if she is too poor to bring a lamb, then she must bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. The priest will make atonement for her with these, so that she will be ceremonially pure again. Leviticus chapter 13, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, if anyone notices a swelling in his skin or a scab or a boil or pimple with transparent skin, leprosy is to be suspected. He must be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons, for the spot is to be examined. If the hair in this spot turns white, and if the spot looks to be more than skin deep, it is leprosy, and the priest must declare him a leper. But if the white spot in the skin does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair in the spot has not turned white, the priest shall quarantine him for 7 days. At the end of that time, on the 17th day, the priest will examine him again. And if the spot has not changed and has not spread in the skin, then the priest must quarantine him 7 days more. Again, on the 7th day, the priest will examine him. And if the mark of the disease have become fainter and have not spread, then the priest shall pronounce him cured. It was only a scab, and the man need only wash his clothes, and everything will be normal again. But if the spot spreads in the skin after he's come to the priest to be examined, he must come back to the priest again. And the priest shall look again, and if the spot has spread, then the priest must pronounce him a leper. When anyone suspected of having leprosy is brought to the priest is to look to see if there is a white swelling in the skin with the white hairs in the spot and an ulcer developing. If he finds these symptoms, it is an established case of leprosy, and the priest must pronounce him defiled. The man is not to be quarantined for further observation, for he is definitely diseased. But if the priest sees that the leprosy has erupted and spread all over his body from head to foot wherever he looks, then the priest shall pronounce him cured of leprosy, for it is all turned white, he is cured. But if there is raw flesh anywhere, the man shall be declared a leper. It is proved by the raw flesh. But if the raw flesh later changes to white, the leper will return to the priest to be examined again. If the spot has indeed turned completely white, then the priest will pronounce him cured. In the case of a man who has a boil in his skin which heals, but which leaves a white swelling or a bright spot, sort of reddish white, the man must go to the priest for examination. If the priest sees that the trouble seems to be down under the skin, and if the hair at the spot is turned white, then the priest shall declare him defiled, for leprosy is broken out from the boil. But if the priest sees that there is no white hairs in this spot, and the spot does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and if the color is gray, then the priest shall quarantine him for 7 days. If during that time the spot spreads, the priest must declare him a leper. But if the bright spot grows no larger than and does not spread, it is merely the scar from the boil, and the priest shall declare that all is well. If a man is burned in some way and the burned place becomes bright reddish white or white, then the priest must examine the spot. If the hair in the bright spot turns white and the problem seems to be more than skin deep, it is leprosy that is broken out from the burn, and the priest must pronounce him a leper. But if the priest sees that there are no white hairs in the bright spot and the brightness appears to be no deeper than the skin and is fading, the priest shall quarantine him for 7 days and examine him again the 7th day. If the spot spreads in the skin, the priest must pronounce him a leper. But if the bright spot does not move or spread in the skin and is fading, it is simply a scar from the burn, and the priest shall declare that he does not have leprosy. If a man or woman has a sore on the head or chin, the priest must examine him. If the infection seems to be below the skin and yellow hair is found in the sore, the priest must pronounce him a leper. But if the priest's examination reveals that the spot seems to be only in the skin, but there is healthy hair in it, then he shall be quarantined for 7 days and examined again on the 7th day. If the spot has not spread and yellow hair has appeared, and if the infection does not seem to be deeper than the skin, he shall shave off the hair from around the spot, but not on the spot itself, and the priest shall quarantine him for another 7 days. He shall be examined again on the 7th day, and if the spot has not spread and it appears to be no deeper than the skin, the priest shall pronounce him well, and after washing his clothes he is free. But if later on this spot begins to spread, then the priest must examine him again, and without waiting to see if any yellow hair develops, declare him a leper. But if it appears that the spreading has stopped and black hairs are found in the spot, then he is healed and is not a leper, and the priest shall declare him healed. If a man or woman has white, transparent areas in the skin, but these spots are growing dimmer, this is not leprosy, but an ordinary infection that is broken out in the skin. If a man's hair is gone, this does not make him a leper, even though he is bald. If the hair is gone from the front part of his head, he simply has a bald Lord Jesus. Let's read that again, verse 41. If the hair is gone from the front part of his head, he simply has a bald forehead, but this is not leprosy. However, if in the baldness there is reddish white spot, it may be leprosy breaking out. In that case, the priest shall examine him, and if there's a reddish white lump that looks like leprosy, then he is a leper, and the priest must pronounce him such. Anyone who is discovered to have leprosy must tear his clothes and let his hair grow in wild disarray and cover his upper lip and call out as he goes, I am a leper, I am a leper. As long as the disease lasts, he is defiled and must live outside the camp. If leprosy is suspected in a woolen or linen garment or fabric, or in the piece of leather or leather work, and there is a greenish or reddish white spot on it, it is probably leprosy and must be taken to the priest to be examined. The priest will put it away for 7 days and look at it again on the seventh day. If the spot is spread, it is a contagious leprosy, and he must burn the clothing, fabric, and linen or woolen covering or leather article, for it is contagious and must be destroyed by fire. But if when he examines it again on the seventh day the spot has not spread, the priest shall order the suspected article to be washed, then isolated for 7 more days. If after that time the spot has not changed its color, even though it has not spread, it is leprosy and shall be burned, for the article is infected through and through. But if the priest sees that the spot has faded after the washing, then he shall cut it out from the garment or leather goods or whatever it is in. However, if it then reappears, it is leprosy, and he must burn it. But if after washing it there is no further trouble, it can be put back into service after another washing. These are the regulations concerning leprosy in a garment or anything made of skin or leather, indicating whether to pronounce it leprous or not. Leviticus chapter 14, verse 1. And the Lord gave Moses these regulations concerning the person whose leprosy disappears. The priest shall go out of the camp to examine him. If the priest sees that the leprosy is gone, he shall require 2 living birds of a kind permitted for food, and shall take some cedar wood, a scarlet string, and some hyssop branches to be used for the purification ceremony of the one who is healed. The priest shall then order one of the birds killed in an earthenware pot held by above running water. The other bird still living shall be dipped in the blood along with the cedar wood, the scarlet thread, and the hyssop branch. Then the priest shall sprinkle the blood 7 times upon the man cured of his leprosy, and the priest shall pronounce him cured, and shall let the living bird fly into the open field. Then the man who is cured shall wash his clothes, shave off his hair, and bathe himself, and return to live inside the camp. However, he must stay outside his tent for 7 days. The 7th day he shall again shave all the hair from his head, beard, and eyebrows, and wash his clothes and bathe, and they shall then be declared fully cured of his leprosy. The next day, the 8th day, he shall take 2 male lambs without physical defect, 1 yearly ewe lamb without physical defect, 10 quarts of finely ground flour mixed with olive oil, and a pint of olive oil. Then the priest who examines him shall place the man and his offerings before the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle. The priest shall take one of the lambs and the pint of olive oil and offer them to the Lord as a guilt offering by the gesture of waving them before the altar. Then he shall kill the lamb at the place where the sin offerings and burnt offerings are killed, there at the tabernacle. This guilt offering shall then be given to the priest for food, as in the case of a sin offering. It is the most holy offering. The priest shall take the blood from his guilt offering and smear some of it upon the tip of the right ear of the man being cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the big toe of his right foot. Then the priest shall take the olive oil and pour it into the palm of his left hand, and dip his right finger into it, and sprinkle it with his finger 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil remaining in his left hand shall then be placed by the priest upon the tip of the man's right ear and the thumb of his right hand and the big toe of his right foot, just as he did with the blood of the guilt offering. The remainder of the oil in his hand shall be used to anoint the man's head. Thus the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord. Then the priest must offer the sin offering and again perform the rite of atonement for the person being cleansed from his leprosy. And afterwards the priest shall kill the burnt offering and offer it along with the grain offering upon the altar, make an atonement for the man, who shall then be pronounced finally cleansed. If he is so poor that he cannot afford 2 lambs, then he shall bring 1 male, a male lamb for the guilt offering to be presented to the Lord in the rite of atonement by waving it before the Lord, and only 3 quarts of fine white flour mixed with olive oil for a grain offering and a pint of olive oil. He shall also bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, whichever he is able to afford, and use one of the pair for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. He shall bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tabernacle on the 8th day for his ceremony of cleansing before the Lord. The priest shall take the lamb for the guilt offering and the pint of oil and wave them before the altar as a gesture of offering to the Lord. Then he shall kill the lamb for the guilt offering and smear some of its blood upon the tip of the man's right ear, the man on whose behalf the ceremony is being performed, and upon the thumb of his right hand and upon the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall then pour the olive oil into the palm of his left hand, with his right finger he is to sprinkle some of it 7 times before the Lord. Then he must put some of the olive oil from his hand upon the tip of the man's right ear, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the big toe of his right foot, just as he did with the blood of the guilt offering. The remaining oil in his hand shall be placed upon the head of the man being cleansed, to make atonement for him before the Lord. Then he must offer the 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, whichever pair he is able to afford. One of the pair is for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering, to be sacrificed along with the grain offering. And the priest shall make atonement for the man before the Lord. These then are the laws concerning those who are cleansed of leprosy, but are not able to bring the sacrifices normally required for the ceremony of cleansing. Then the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when you arrive in the land of Canaan, which I have given you, and I place leprosy in some house there, then the owner of the house shall come and report to the priest, it seems to me that there may be leprosy in my house. The priest shall order the house to be empty before he examines it, so that everything in the house will not be declared contaminated if he decides that there is leprosy there. If he finds greenish or reddish streaks in the walls of the house, which seem to be beneath the surface of the wall, he shall close up the house for 7 days, and return the 7th day to look at it again. If the spots have spread in the wall, then the priest shall order the removal of the spotted section of the wall, and the material must be thrown into a defiled place outside the city. Then he shall order the inside walls of the house scraped thoroughly, and scrapings dumped in a defiled place outside the city. Other stones shall be brought to replace those that have been removed, new mortar used, and the house replastered. But if the spots appear again, the priest shall come again and look, and if he sees the spots have spread, it is leprosy, and the house is defiled. Then he shall order the destruction of the house. Wow. All its stones, timbers, and mortar shall be carried out of the city to a defiled place. Anyone entering in the house while it is closed shall be defiled until evening. Anyone who lies down or eats in the house shall wash his clothing. But if when the priest comes again to look, the spots have not reappeared after the fresh plastering, then he will pronounce the house cleansed and declare the leprosy gone. He shall also perform the ceremony of cleansing using 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet thread, and hyssop branches. He shall kill one of the birds over fresh water in an earthenware bowl, and dip the cedar wood, hyssop branch, and scarlet thread, as well as the living bird, into the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water, and shall sprinkle the house 7 times. In this way the house shall be cleansed. Then he shall let the live bird fly away into an open field outside the city. This is the method for making atonement for the house and cleansing it. These then are the laws concerning the various places where leprosy may appear, in a garment or in a house, or any swelling in one's skin, or a scab from a burn or a bright spot. In this way you will know whether or not it is actually leprosy. This is why these laws are given. Leviticus chapter 15, verse 1. The Lord told Moses and Aaron to give the people of Israel these further instructions. If any man who has a genital discharge is ceremonially defiled, this applies not only while the discharge is active, but also for a time after it heals. Any bed he lies on and anything he sits on is contaminated. So anyone touching the man's bed is ceremonially defiled until evening and must wash his clothes and bathe himself. Anyone sitting on a seat the man has sat upon, anyone sitting on a seat the man has sat upon while defiled is himself ceremonially impure until evening, and must wash his clothes and bathe himself. The same instructions apply to anyone touching him. Anyone he spits on, Jesus, is ceremonially impure until evening and must wash his clothes and bathe himself. Any saddle he rides on is defiled. Anyone touching or carrying anything that was beneath him shall be defiled until evening and must wash his clothes and bathe himself. If the defiled man touches anyone without first rinsing his hands, that person must wash his clothes and bathe himself and be defiled until evening. Any earthen pot touched by the defiled man must be broken, and every wooden utensil must be rinsed in water. When the discharge stops, he shall begin a 7-day cleansing ceremony by washing his clothes and bathing himself in running water. On the 8th day he shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and come before the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle and give them to the priest. The priest shall sacrifice them there, one for the sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. Thus the priest shall make atonement before the Lord for the man because of his discharge. Whenever a man's semen goes out from him, he shall take a complete bath and be ceremonially impure until the evening. Any clothing or bedding the semen spills on must be washed and remain ceremonially defiled until evening. After sexual intercourse, the woman as well as the man must bathe, and they are ceremonially defiled until the next evening. Whenever a woman menstruates, she shall be in a state of ceremonial defilement for 7 days afterward, and during that time anyone touching her shall be defiled until evening. Anything she lies on or sits on during that time shall be defiled. Anyone touching her bed or anything she sits upon shall wash his clothes and bathe himself and be ceremonially defiled until evening. A man having sexual intercourse with her during this time is ceremonially defiled for 7 days, and every bed he lies upon shall be defiled. If the menstrual flow continues after the normal time or at some irregular time during the month, the same rules apply as indicated above, so that anything she lies upon during that time is defiled, just as it would be during her normal menstrual period, and everything she sits on is in a similar state of defilement. Anyone touching her bed or anything she sits on shall be defiled, and shall wash his clothes and bathe and be defiled until evening. 7 days after the menstruating stops, she is no longer ceremonially defiled. On the 8th day, she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tabernacle. And the priest shall offer one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, and make atonement for her before the Lord for her menstrual defilement. In this way you shall cleanse the people of Israel from their defilement, lest they die because of defiling my tabernacle that is among them. This then is the law for the man who is defiled by genital disease, or by seminal emission, or for a woman's menstrual period, and for anyone who has sexual intercourse with her while she is in her period of defilement afterwards. Leviticus chapter 16, verse 1. After Aaron's 2 sons died before the Lord said to Moses, "Warn your brother Aaron not to enter the holy place behind the veil, where the ark and the place of mercy are, just whenever he chooses. The penalty for intrusion is death, for I myself am present in the cloud above the place of mercy." Here are the conditions for his entering this place. He must bring a young bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He must bathe himself and put on the sacred linen, coat, shorts, belt, and turban. The people of Israel shall then bring him 2 male goats for their sin offering and a ram for their burnt offering. First he shall present to the Lord the young bull as a sin offering for himself, making atonement for himself and his family. Then he shall bring the 2 goats before the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle and cast lots to determine which is the Lord's and which is to be sent away. The goat allotted to the Lord shall then be sacrificed by Aaron as a sin offering. The other goat shall be kept alive and placed before the Lord. The rite of atonement shall be performed over it, and it shall be sent into the desert as a scapegoat. After Aaron has sacrificed the young bull as a sin offering for himself and his family, he shall take a censer full of live coals from the altar of the Lord, and fill his hands with sweet incense beaten with fine powder, and bring it inside the veil. There before the Lord he shall put the incense upon the coals, so that the cloud of incense will cover the mercy place above the ark, containing the stone of the tablets of the commandments. Thus he will not die. And he shall bring some of the blood of the young bull and sprinkle it with his finger upon the east side of the place of mercy, and then 7 times in front of it. Then he must go out and sacrifice the people's sin offering goat, and bring its blood within the veil, and sprinkle it upon the place of mercy in front of it, just as he did with the blood of the young bull. Thus he shall make atonement for the holy place, because it is defiled by the sins of the people of Israel, and for the tabernacle located right among them and surrounded by their defilement. Not another soul shall be inside the tabernacle when Aaron enters to make atonement in the holy place, not until after he comes out again and has made atonement for himself and his household and for all the people of Israel. Then he shall go out to the altar before the Lord and make atonement for it. He must smear the blood of the young bull and the goat on the horns of the altar, and sprinkle blood upon the altar 7 times with his finger, thus cleansing it from the sinfulness of Israel and making it holy. When he has completed the rite of atonement for the holy place, the entire tabernacle and the altar, he shall bring the live goat, and, laying both hands upon its head, confess over it all the sins of the people of Israel. He shall lay all their sins upon the head of the goat and send it into the desert, led by a man appointed for the task. So the goat shall carry all the sins of the people into a land where no one lives, and the man shall let it loose in the wilderness. Then Aaron shall go into the tabernacle again and take off the linen garments he wore when he went behind the veil, and leave them there in the tabernacle. Then he shall bathe in a sacred place, put on his clothes again, and go out and sacrifice his own burnt offering for the people, making atonement for himself and for them. He shall also burn upon the altar the fat for the sin offering. The man who took the goat out into the desert shall afterwards wash his clothes and bathe himself, and then come back into the camp. And the young bull and the goat used for the sin offering, their blood was taken into the holy place by Aaron to make atonement, shall be carried outside the camp and burned, including the hides and the internal organs. Afterwards, the person doing the burning shall wash his clothes and bathe himself, and then return to the camp. This is a permanent law. You must do no work on the 25th day of September, but must spend the day in self-examination and humility. This applies whether you are born in the land or are a foreigner living among the people of Israel. For this is the day commemorating the atonement cleansing you in the Lord's eyes from all of your sins. It is a Sabbath of solemn rest for you, and you shall spend the day in quiet humility. This is a permanent law. This ceremony in later generations shall be performed by the anointed high priest, consecrated in place of his ancestor Aaron. He shall be the one to put on the holy linen garments and make atonement for the holy sanctuary, the tabernacle, the altar, the priests, and the people. This shall be an everlasting law for you to make atonement for the people of Israel once each year because of their sins. And Aaron followed all these instructions that the Lord gave to Moses. This is the word